Got it. Well, welcome everyone. We'll start in just a moment, but before we do, I want to remind you that this session is being live streamed on EDA's LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook channels. So if you're not comfortable and you don't agree to having your image appear in this recording, you can turn off your camera now. And I'm asking everyone to please mute yourselves now so that there will not be any interfering feedback in the sound system. I would like to call your attention to the reminder notice that you received yesterday. We included the links to the live streaming channels there. So please feel free to pass those links on to your friends or family or colleagues if they're interested in any of this material. These links will stay the same for the next 2 live stream sessions. July 5th will be our last session in this seminar. We will, after the seminar concludes, we will send out another notice to all the registrants that will include the recording for the last session. We'll include the recording for tonight's session in the reminder notice for next week's seminar. So with that, James, do you want to get us started?
We've already started.
No, I mean the principles of local economic democracy.
Don't talk to me right now.
Session 6 is titled "The Story of Self-Sufficiency."
Okay.
All right, what?
Welcome to week 6,
that special
the story of
product
self-sufficiency.
Yes, I haven't
But
done
first, let's
anything.
review what we covered in the last
Wherever you
5
put it.
weeks.
Please mute.
In weeks 1 and 2, we discussed the fundamental algorithms of modern economics: use value and exchange value. Use value generates our engagement with others through the practical utilization of resources. Exchange value generates trust among people in the marketplace. We recognize that while they express the dynamic forces of freedom and equality in human society, use value and exchange value are driven more by what people want than what they need. In week 3, we discussed how use value and exchange value slow down the allocation of resources to those in need while destroying our environment. What is virtually missing today in society is the practice of social cooperation and a culture of mutual caring and solidarity that it would generate. In week 4, we examined how the structures of economics and governance depend on culture to humanize them and bring them into harmony. In week 5, we recognized the critical importance of education and technology in supporting cooperative culture. This has created greater complexity in society, but made our lives more comfortable and efficient. Yet all of this is still not enough to transform the modern economy. In this session, we'll explore the story of self-sufficiency. Most of us are familiar with the self-regulating cycles in the human body and the natural world. The world itself is a self-ordering system that works through natural evolution. Because people co-evolve with nature, our communities must also be self-organizing. This applies to all levels of human life, from the family, neighborhood, and community to the district, nation, and planet. Yet one of the world's great paradoxes is that our economies can grow only by getting people to overconsume beyond their needs. Even though biology shows that no population can live beyond the limits of its ecosystem, modern society ignores this natural law. We tell ourselves that since humans are an intelligent species with vast scientific insight and technical skills, We would never harm civilization by creating perilous imbalances within society or nature. This is why we use a market economy, because it is self-adjusting and avoids any misallocation of resources. Yet the free market is neither self-regulating nor self-organizing. It's just a crude approximation of a dynamically balanced ecosystem. On one hand, supply does not account for the planetary limits of non-renewable resources. On the other hand, demand does not represent real human needs. It's little wonder that the world seems disjointed. We have mistaken the economic formula of supply and demand for a self-regulating and self-evolving law of nature.
So we're going to pause here, and I think I'll pose a question. Why is it that anyone on the call here thinks that supply and demand are usually seen as a law of nature? Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Or if anyone has any other questions that they would like to ask at this point. Yes, Claire. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, we think that way because of capitalist propaganda. I never thought of it like that.
That's a good short answer. Anyone else? Dee Loescher, you had your hand up for a second there. I'm interested in what you would have to say.
Not really.
Yeah.
I just wanted you to repeat the question.
Oh, the question is, why do you think that supply and demand are usually seen as a law of nature rather than, for example, as a man-made, or as Claire said, sort of propagandistic statement?
Well, in the slide before, it said something about demand, the second part of the slide. I can't remember what it was, but that kind of made me wonder, I wrote it down and I only got demand doesn't, so I don't know. But anyway, that's all.
James, you have a comment.
Yeah, so what Dee was saying is demand doesn't represent our real needs. Demand is only about how much money you have to pay for something. And that's the only measure we have of demand. Human need is more of a physiological kind of thing, and we can actually measure that too, but they're entirely different things. So that's one way that the idea of supply and demand doesn't work, because ecosystems are based on human needs. So the social ecosystem is partly based on a false premise. We're just saying, how much money do you have? And that's the measure of demand. It doesn't necessarily represent your needs. And then on the supply side, what it really means is that how much resources in our modern economy, it means how much resources are available from the production process that could be used to meet people's demands. And again, the idea here is that it's what we have now with supply and demand is an approximation for a self-regulating and self-evolving system, which is tantamount to a law of nature. And as Claire said, we've been taught that because the human ecosystem is a kind of replication of an ecosystem. However, it isn't. It's a more artificial system. The economy is not embedded in the biosphere, meaning the whole ecological construct that involves the Earth as a planet, and therefore supply and demand is just something very arbitrary. And then again, the last point is that on the supply side, in the same way that demand does not equal need, supply being the culmination of available products does not necessarily mean all the resources in nature that are either non-renewable or renewable. So that's where the real supply side comes from. It comes from nature. It doesn't come from our productive economy, from the system of production.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question here? In the issue of supply and demand, or anything else that we've covered so far? Wants and needs. Jacqueline.
My parents' generation grew up with little, growing up during the Great Depression and all. And when they were able to stabilize their, their financial, internal household finances, they still had the old consciousness, where it was basically more a need consciousness than a want consciousness. And that became very distressful to manufacturers. It seems that they decided to, as Claire was talking about, ramp up, advertising and begin to sort of brainwash us into thinking that we needed a lot more than we actually did. But then also, that coincided with the post-World War II sort of booming economy, relatively speaking, where people had more money. So people were very susceptible to shifting that whole idea of want or of need into the want, that, okay, now I've got a bit of money, I'm going to buy all the stuff they're telling me I need. So there was this big psychological reprogramming that happened in Western culture, especially American culture, that threw it all off balance to where it had very little, I think, connection to the natural world where wants, and well, not wants and needs, but supply and demand are more naturally balanced.
Thank you. Anyone else before we continue on here in our programming? Yes, Dee.
Well, I wanted to say that I'm from Iowa, and we have a little town in Cresco, Iowa. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Norman Borlaug, but he won the World Food Prize, and his area was of wheat. And he felt, and I know he's not alive anymore, but he felt that the wheat that he had produced, if they kept producing it, could feed the whole world. But unfortunately, I think the wheat has changed now. It's been shifted, I guess. But anyway, he was from my state.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm familiar with Norman Borlaug. He did a lot of research on what are considered to be the roots or the wild relatives of wheat and how to improve that the production, the yield of the wheat. And that was very important, particularly in the post-war period where there was a population boom. So thank you for that. James.
Norman Borlaug was famous for being the godfather of the Green Revolution, it was called, in the 60s. And he became really famous for that because it did really help to generate much more crop production, and it pulled a lot of people out of poverty. And he was really highly lauded for that. At the same time, there were critics who said, you know what he did to expedite the yield of resources in agriculture was actually going to diminish the soil fertility. And they predicted that within 30 or 40 years, a lot of those places would have less yield than previously. And that has actually turned out to be true. So it's one of the cases where I think the motivation for increasing the yield was purely financial rather than to solve the problems of poverty among growing populations, because it was promoted mainly by the manufacturers of the new seeds and the new techniques, rather than the governments who were more interested in reducing poverty. So so the Green Revolution, if you read in the Wikipedia and other places, has actually failed over a period of time. It worked for several decades, and then it really fell down into a decline.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Brad.
Just one little addition. I would even give the scientists and the government people, and maybe even the people that worked in the corporations, not necessarily Wall Street, the benefit of the doubt, and suggest that maybe they were just short-sighted and they did mean well. That's all I want to add. And just short-sightedness or too narrow of a view can, lead to the greatest of intentions to have unforeseen consequences. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you very much. Very important. Kim Adams, you have a comment. You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, over a long period of time, over the last 500 or 1,000 years, I think that there's been kind of a sense of limitless supply in the entire in the world as such. And if we run out of things here, then we can cross the ocean and discover a whole new continent with more resources I agree what was just said about it was a matter of being kind of short-sighted, but you can hardly blame people 500 years ago from not being able to understand that. However, now we're becoming certainly more aware that our planet's resources are indeed limited vis-a-vis our population, and so that requires us to really do something, which is what EDA is all about.
Thank you, Kim. Anyone else? Very interesting discussion. Kim, did you have something else to add? Your hand is still up, so I'm just asking. Okay. James, do you want to go ahead and restart the video and we'll continue on?
So, how do we know that the algorithms of use value and exchange value are not naturally self-organizing? And how do we know that the economic growth rates of profit and compound interest are disrupting our coevolution with nature? Because economic growth is causing widespread poverty and ecological degradation. By stimulating the economic demand of our expanding population, we overuse Earth's fixed amount of non-renewable resources, and we don't adequately replenish renewable resources. The old story, supply creates its own demand, favors the market value of resources over the basic needs of our population. This imbalanced equation has driven humanity to deplete Earth's natural resources. It also generates massive social and ecological debt. Our new story ought to focus on how the resources available within an ecosystem must be distributed to those who need them. In a self-sufficient social system, measuring a need would trigger its being met. This principle of automatic distribution could create resource self-reliance within every region on the planet. Yet, human societies are still at square one. We have barely recognized that our shared commons cannot belong to one generation more than another. nor have we understood how the mounting costs of our damage to Earth are being paid by those who are not responsible for this destruction. How do we get from knowing what our needs are to effectively meeting them? There are two basic steps. First, determine the potential amount of resources in an area that can meet the needs of the people in that area. Second, determine the actual percentage of the region's population whose needs are met by the goods produced and distributed in that region. Our continuous analysis of needs measured and needs met will require the cooperation of the entire community through self-governance. Resource democracy is the only form of government that can make this work, that can acknowledge both the sustainability of resources and their distribution to people. In modern democracies, however, a top-down system of authority has resisted human co-evolution with nature and ignored the possibilities of self-sufficiency through social cooperation. This is why we must work with elected officials who have oversight of our access to and use of resources. We must show our leaders why it's not necessary to exploit the natural resources outside our region or to depend on corporations that do so. We must teach them how we can sustain our population through community management of the resources in the place where we live. This is why representative democracy is not enough. Participatory democracy is also part of our social responsibility. Local groups must take an active role in decisions to share their resources through a mutual system of public services. This decentralized approach requires a collective change of heart and mind. We need to tell the story of where we come from, our purpose for being here, and how we shall survive and thrive in this fragile environment. Without this new history of who we are, civilization will slowly collapse. Indeed, the world is now in a period of decline, which is why societies need a narrative about the self-sufficient use of the resources common for all people. This story is just as vital for the nourishment of the human race as our air, water, food, and energy. Given our growing economic and ecological deficits, humanity must look far ahead to see how people's future needs will be met. Individual participation in community decisions and activities is necessary. The goal of democratic self-governance for our commons is to meet the needs of all people in the present, while making Earth habitable for future generations. Next week, we'll examine why a plan for self-sufficiency today is the next step in honoring the needs and rights of citizens tomorrow.
Thank you, James. Are there any questions that anyone has on the presentation, or because I have a couple of questions that I can maybe provoke some discussion, but I'd like to hear from you first. Sandra.
It's a technical question. I find that the slides were going too fast because when I try and jot a note, it's gone. And so I didn't get the full 2 steps to take. So I just wanted to give you that feedback for the future because, you know, to really listen and absorb, it's necessary to have the time to do that. And it is, I realize, a very fine balance.
Understood. And that is one reason why we have provided recordings of these presentations so that you can go back and listen as many times as you want. Yes, Sandra.
That's great, but it doesn't help me participate in the present discussion.
Understood. Point taken. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Well, if no one else has a question, I have a question. And I'd like to pose this for your consideration. So what does self-governance have to do with self-sufficiency? Jacqueline.
I don't think of self-governance as being just, or self-sufficiency, I should say, as being sufficiency just for myself personally, individually. Self-sufficiency would be for, you know, everyone on the call, the community writ large. So if that's an accurate sort of description of self-sufficiency, then self-governance is all the more important collectively, so that we can provide for the sufficiency of everyone long term.
Okay. James, you have a comment.
In the past, economic democracy has been defined about everyone having equal rights. And that question has evolved over a period of time, because now over the last 30 or 40 years, we've recognized that part of the equal rights is the access to resources on the planet. And so the question is then that if we're talking about economic democracy, why couldn't that be rebranded as resource democracy to really put a fine point on this? And so what it really entails is that self-sufficiency and self-government are actually two sides of the same coin, because we can't have self-sufficiency truly unless we self-organize to make that happen. And the self-organization is a form of self-governance. So one of the points the slideshow made was that we have now representative democracy, which is really an indirect kind of democracy. Our representatives don't directly represent us. And now, so with self-governance, we're really talking about community organizing to manage the activities in the community, that which includes sharing our resources. So that's why it seems to me that in the future, there'll be very little difference between the meaning of self-governance and self-sufficiency, because they will have the same goals.
Okay. Greg.
Yeah, just the idea of self-sufficiency and self-governance, you know, and James brings up the term distributive a lot, and that I think that's important, because participatory democracy to me is more like distributive democracy, rather than what James was just talking about with our representative democracy is more like a proxy democracy. Distributive democracy is more, just has distributive feedback throughout it. And for the distributive resource democracy, we know now that it's not going to happen unless we step up and insist on our distributed resource. So it takes a kind of a distributive democracy to do that.
Brad.
Yeah, I just want to pick up and kind of reinforce something that James said when he said two sides of the same coin. I'm not sure I heard it quite this, otherwise I wouldn't be repeating it. I think you can't have one truly without the other. And it's kind of like rights, you know, the yin and yang, it's rights and responsibilities. But more specifically, you know, to have self-sufficiency, you have to have the agency of self-governance to be able to achieve that. And to have self-governance, you have to have some degree of self-sufficiency so that you have the resources and strength, you know, to engage in self-governance. And the last thing I was thinking on this is, you know, it operates on multiple levels. There's the personal level of relative self-sufficiency and self-governance. If we don't have the maturity and the, personal growth to, be able to do those things. And then, of course, there's the collective level. So just some additional thoughts.
Okay. And Greg, you have a comment about that?
Yeah, just real short. Years ago, I tried to think of ways to visualize things, and I kind of visualized that what the type of democracy that we have, this proxy democracy, it ends up being kind of a chandelier democracy, kind of from the top down. And the good stuff goes up to the top where the chandelier is. And what we need is more like a carpet democracy. That's, to me, that a distributive democracy is more like what I think of as kind of a carpet democracy.
Okay. D.
That was really interesting, Greg, what you just said there. For me, self-governance, for me, means D, self-governance. I'm self-governance myself. When I move into self-sufficiency, it feels more that I'm including people. So individual versus the collective. That's how I take it.
Interesting point. Su Shen.
I don't know how appropriate this comment would be, but to me, to be really able to be self-sufficient and self-governance is naturally, that's what we are able to talk in this country. There has to be some form of democracy. And then also the idea of participatory, democracy. So to me, self means that we have to be willing and then feel safe to start to demand and start to understand what are my true needs? Where can I really, do something for myself, and then try to figure out, what are and how to get what I need, and how then to cooperate with other people around me in the community, or or other resources that I might have at hand, and then also the idea of sharing. So that all tie in for me. And so that's why it is important we have some kind of cultural environment that does allow that sense of safety, so I can truly have a chance to see what is it that I have that power within myself to become more reliable myself. And then in turn, as I strengthen my ability to provide for myself, my family, and what have you, my group of friends, and then to expand. And of course, that doesn't do it one step at a time. Sometimes it's multi-layered in so many different ways, in so many different directions. I don't know if I made sense.
You made yourself perfectly clear. I think that was a very thoughtful contribution to the discussion. Ed Dunbar. Are you there, Ed?
He might be muted.
No, he's not. Now he's muted. Can't hear you, Ed. Can we come back to you, Ed? I'm going to go to Sandra Harrison for a moment.
I just wanted to make a quick interjection when Dee was mentioning self-governance, individual, self-sufficiency, collective. I think we also have to be aware that the collective has to be self-governing too, or else we could have a little bit of chaos. So there's a little bit of both there for both individual and collective.
Very good point. Ed, can we come back to you now?
I think Ed might be the person that in the beginning had to go off and come back on because he was having trouble.
Oh,
maybe he's still having those same trouble. Oh, there he is. Can you talk?
There's Ed.
Can we hear you?
Okay, Ed. No, can't hear you. Well, if you can put it into the chat or have Eva mouth it for you, that might help. James.
Yeah, the principle that brings for me together the two sides of the coin, which is self-governance and self-sufficiency, is that yes, indeed, they both apply to the individual and the collective. But what brings them together is that they both represent self-organizing. So it takes self-organization to become self-sufficient. So this isn't just a matter of the individual. It also is a matter that the society is also self-sufficient. And in order to make that happen, that organization takes place. And the organization also takes place in the development of self-governance, not only for the person, but also for the society to make self-sufficiency possible. So the two things sound different because we define them differently, but when you think of both of them as being self-organizing, then you really hit on what the solution is. And I would agree with the idea that was expressed before about distribution. Distribution is something that we don't really understand, because for us today, distribution is more a function of the supply. Capitalism has often been characterized as the model that says supply creates its own demand. So it doesn't allow demand to have an independent property. It just says supply it and they will buy, or produce it and they will come to buy. And that's really the reverse of the way it ought to work. That's a very top-down model. And what needs to take place is a more bottom-up kind of approach. What Greg was talking about, the carpet, democracy instead of the chandelier democracy, meaning that we need to be able to understand distribution is something that is not a function of top-down, trickle-down theory. It's like the rich will provide enough and the excess will automatically be distributed to the poor. You recognize that there is no law in modern society that says that rich have to share their goods with the poor. But there are laws that the poor have to certainly supply the labor and raw materials for the rich. That's part of our economic canon, but the reverse is not true. So you can point to justice, the injustice of society right there. It doesn't really work, because the overriding definition we have right now is that things move from supply to demand, when in fact, as we've noted earlier, neither of those is correct in terms of what they represent as a function of nature. Supply actually represents the resources. Demand actually represents people's need. So the real question is, how do we utilize the resources to meet people's needs? And that is a point of measuring not the supply, but measuring the demand as expressed in needs. So basically, it's a flow model. The flow shouldn't go from supply to demand. The flow should go from need to the resources that are available. That is the key question that humanity right now is grappling with, because as resources dwindle, particularly non-renewable resources, in the face of a growing population, that's becoming a critical problem.
Okay. Ed, I think we have you now. I'll get to you in just a second, Brad. Go ahead, Ed.
That's the first thing I was going to say.
Okay. I missed a lot because of the problems with my computer. I was attempting to run the meeting through my VPN and it didn't work. So anyway, I'm stuck with the analysis or the explanation of governance. Self-governance To me, I mean, governance relates to government. What's the purpose of government? If everyone were self-governing themselves, we would not need laws. Laws are basically made to control people and make them do what is logical and survival for the whole group. But if you haven't got self-governance, you make a government to regulate everybody's behavior, which ain't working. You know, it's really basic. It's like the antithesis to religion. Okay, so if we're all evil, we need a government to regulate our behavior so that we all get some kind of survival, or so that the rich get richer, you know, whatever. But self-governance means doing the right thing, you know, knowing that I have to share with everyone all of the resources, and just it's what's it called? Common sense. You know, common sense. Where is that? Anyway, that's just my comment on the whole aspect of governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's very important. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I want to kind of pick up again on something. I like Greg's metaphor of chandelier and carpet, and I want to take it a step further. You know, carpet kind of seems to imply, you know, bottom-up approaches, and I've been very, you know, inclined in that direction for many years, and my experience has been that that ain't enough either. So I want to propose the metaphor of tabletop instead of chandelier or carpet, where you know, their power is a reality, and hierarchy is a reality. I think I might have shared this before. You know, there are natural hierarchies. There's different levels of, you know, experience, character, capabilities, and things like that in different areas. And I've found that leadership is very necessary. Like this wouldn't have come together if some people hadn't, you know, exercised leadership. So I just want to kind of add a little, another layer of richness to this metaphor, and recognize that that you know that we, you know, we need to draw upon the skills that might be distributed and the powers that may be distributed hierarchically, and draw in the skills and capabilities that are more distributed, and find a system and an approach that works in the reality of where we are. That's my addition. Thanks.
Thank you. Greg, you have a comment.
Yeah, I just, what Brad was saying, just brought into my mind the Mondragon cooperative in Spain. And in Mondragon, it's very successful. It's an industrial model cooperative. There are many, many industries that do it. And in Mondragon, the organizational structure is all based on everybody getting their needs met, really, and it works really, really well. But, you know, the top down, you know, the chandelier versus carpet thing is just kind of the pay scale structure, from the lowest pay of anybody in the industry to the highest organizational figure, is 6 to 9 to 1. Sometimes it's 9 to 1, sometimes it's 6 to 1. And that's the difference. Instead of 300 and something to 1, it's 6 to 1. And so it brings into mind that cooperative model of everybody's needs getting met. It works really well when you can see an example like that.
Thank you. Any other contributions or comments on this particular question? If not, I have another one. So do you think, or how would, let me just phrase it this way, how would self-sufficiency transform use value and exchange value? This is a quiz. You get 10 points if you can even answer the question. I'm
Say it
just
one more
going for the gold here. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, just say it one more time, Terry.
How would self-sufficiency transform use value and exchange value? Right now, we have a dichotomous situation where we've got use value and exchange value, and they sometimes seem to be mutually exclusive. But how would self-sufficiency transform that? Go ahead, Brad.
So I as usual, have a thought, but I actually wanted to put my hand up here to invite. I'd love to hear, no pressure, but I'd love to hear from, because I've spoken a lot, too much. And I'd love to hear from some of you who might, be a little more reticent to speak. And I'd love to hear from some of you that I haven't heard from. So I want to invite that first. I always have a thought, but that's what I put my hand up for.
So in other words, you're stumped by this question. Great.
No, I didn't
Eva.
say that. I do have a thought on it, but I'm not stumped. I'm just stepping back.
Okay. Eva or Ed? You're on mute.
Unmute.
So, thank you, Brad. So I'm growing a garden this year for the first time in my life. And I'm seeing that being self-sufficient in that regard means that I buy what matters to me. I don't buy just because somebody sends me an email and says, if you buy this much from this gardening supply, you'll get free shipping. So I think self-sufficiency puts those two values into a more correct balance. That's all.
Interesting point. Anyone else? James.
Well, I think the question is kind of a trick question, but in a way.
I found out.
Because it actually is to bring the entire seminar into perspective. So we began with use value and exchange value. We said there's a dichotomy there, needs to be resolved. How do we do that? We said the answer is cooperation leading to greater culture and using education and technology to support that. But we left last week dangling because that didn't resolve the problem between use value and exchange value. In fact, education and technology we talked about last week actually, in some cases, it makes the dichotomy even worse between use value and exchange value. But all of those areas are necessary to get the cultural cooperation, education, technology are all necessary to get to the point of use value, or to get to the point of self-sufficiency, because those are ingredients that we need to be able to bring ourselves to that level. In other words, to begin to self-govern, self-organize, become self-sufficient in terms of all of the tools that are at our that are available to us. And in doing so, then we're on the cusp of being able to transcend that dichotomy between the use value, which expresses our needs, and exchange value, which expresses our wants. Because I think we've agreed that that is a fundamental dichotomy that runs throughout everything. Now that we have all the tools necessary to make that happen, what's missing now is that whole idea of self-organization. And really, I think you need to expand the concept sometimes about what self-governance actually does mean. I think we use a traditional understanding of self-governance to mean, well, it means I govern myself, but really self-governance is the definition of government, in the sense that collective self-governance is nothing but government. So the two things are, they're not the same thing. However, they both have the same basic definition. It's about, as I said, it's about self-organization. And so, so I think the ideal here is that if we agree that use value and exchange value are important drivers in this, or they're algorithms in the whole economy that we've structured, and how to make that better, it seems to me that it's going to take a form of resource democracy to pull it all together. And I think we need to go through the different stages that we've discussed in this seminar to be able to make that happen.
Anyone else? It is a tricky question. Self-sufficiency. What does self-sufficiency mean to you? Is it just getting your own needs met? Or is it getting our own needs met? Jacqueline.
Self-sufficiency to me doesn't have a lot to do with things, with having the material things that I enjoy and even that I need in my life. Self-sufficiency is more that I have the kinds of qualities or capabilities that I need to see that those needs can be met for myself and for the whole. I can't really deal with, any of the terms or concepts that we're talking about tonight that relate to self-sufficiency in terms of my own self, separate from everyone else. That's just kind of impossible for me, because my needs can't be met truly unless others' needs are met, and preferably everyone's needs are met. And that to me is self-sufficiency. So I just, anytime I hear the term self-sufficiency, it goes bigger.
Self is a malleable thing. Greg.
Yeah, just to me, that just rings way down to the bottom of the rabbit hole. Self-sufficiency is basically understanding who you are and understanding what your needs are. And most of us obviously, in this society don't. Maybe they used to more than we do now, but we need to be re-educated. And so I think that, some form of some way to reintroduce, educating people about why we're here, I guess, but what our needs are. I think that's an important first step to self-sufficiency, at least at a collective level. Well, individual level too, I guess.
Jacqueline, go ahead.
That kind of takes me back to what Ed was talking about earlier in terms of self-governance, and him asking the question that if we were all capable of self-governing, then do we need a government? And maybe, some people might say no. But again, self-governance means that I am then capable of working with others, usually through a set of guidelines or rules, if not laws, to work together so that we can get our needs met as a whole. So I need to be able to self-govern in order that we can self-govern as a collective. And that does require guidelines or laws or rules or something that, can integrate our respective vision or view of our own self-governance. So again, it's the collective and the individual that are always, in my mind, integrating.
Thank you very much. Dee.
Thank you. I just want to add on to what Jacqueline said. That was just so perfect for me. Because in order, we have all of that, self-governance, self-sufficiency, then we can teach others. We can be the example that we want to go with this collective. And the only way we can do it is to have it ourselves first. And then we can teach and be an example. So thank you, Jacqueline. That was good.
Great. Thank you very much, Dee. Sandra.
I just think if you're talking self-government, you're talking many, 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 many levels, right? You start with the individual. You start with the individual in the family, then the community, and then the municipality, and then you just keep getting broader and broader, and then you have the government to manage the infrastructure and everything else that fills people's needs for travel, etc., and such and such. But then the government is perhaps one state, or then it goes up another level to the federal, to the country, and then that country has to self-govern within the governance of a continent, and then from a continent to several continents, and then to the world. So it's just ongoing because of our deep and interconnection. That's who we are and what we are living in.
Good point. We're almost at the top of the hour. I'd like to give a couple of seconds to Carl, if you're here, Carl, if you have anything to say about EDA and its direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. This was an awesome conversation. I felt like I was sitting back in a graduate school classroom, listening to dialogue after we had gone through some form of case studies to come to a conclusion for the class. So this was a really, really awesome discussion to actually think about self-sustainability, self-governance, and other important factors, I think, that impact our society. I'm looking forward to Eric shaking the cat's tail, but I'm looking forward to the continued discussion because I believe this becomes a powerful tool for advocacy for our organization moving forward and for people. I think the idea of what advocacy really provides, it's an opportunity to start with education, right? It's an opportunity to take the items that we've researched, go through a process of education to further apply opportunities for research, and then to do like my good buddy Jacqueline tells me, to use that as a space to drive legislation, right? We are not lobbyists as an organization, but we like to see an outcome that produces legislation. And so the work that we do through advocacy, education, and research should drive legislation. It should drive change. It should drive society to be in a better place. And it should drive an enhancement in the participation of the democratic process. And so I'm glad to see that we're doing work at the margins to ensure that society is better equipped for tomorrow. The work that we do at EDA is legacy building work. It's legacy developing work. I'm excited that we still have founders that are part of the organization today to help us ensure that mantle and help encourage us to maintain the ethos of what we're doing as an organization. And I'm happy to see that in the process, what we're doing is we're willing to learn, to glean from one another, and to become better. A couple weeks ago, one of our members' grandsons asked, why aren't we on YouTube? Why are we on LinkedIn? Why aren't we going on Facebook? And so we said, let's do something to fix it. And so last week, for the first time, we went live to more massive audiences. So here's where I need your help. I need you to go to LinkedIn and follow us if you have a LinkedIn account. I need you to go to YouTube and subscribe to us if you have a YouTube account or a Gmail account. I need you to go to Facebook and follow us if you don't already follow us. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, what we found out is that we have quite a few people who are actually following us. I think almost 5,000 people are following us on Facebook, but we don't nearly have that level of support on YouTube and LinkedIn. So I hope that before the end of today's meeting, I just put a link in your chat. If you go to YouTube and follow us and subscribe to our content so that you know moving forward, anytime we produce something, it goes on board. What you guys may not know is last night, session 4 when uploaded and broadcast, that was not one that we live broadcast. So if you go to our YouTube channel, 3 of our sessions, 4, 5, and 6 should now be available. You are all part of the live broadcast for session 5. I took the time to go ahead and just put session 4 up on my own, and session 6 will be done once we're completed with this opportunity. And it'll just live on our Facebook channel. So live on our Facebook and our YouTube channels. And eventually when we get to 150 followers, on LinkedIn, we'll be able to broadcast there. So I want you to know the EDA is going further, it's going farther, and it's going harder than it's ever gone before. I am grateful to stand in the stead of our past managing director, James Quilligan, and to ensure working with him the work that he's doing to help graft us into Europe and to being a global organization to be able to continue to do that. And so with that being said, that also means we need your help. So after we went live and realized there was a cost associated with the what we did to be able to go live on a monthly charge, I said to my wife, I think we should give money to EDA monthly so that we could do this. So we went in last week and we started a $50 a month recurring donation. And that's enough to cover the streaming fee that we have over the course of time. So that's my commitment, right? I hope that some of you can help make commitments as well. So if you go to sustaineda.org/donate, you have an opportunity to make your commitment known, to make a monthly donation, to support the ongoing advocacy and education of the work that we do. I don't want to be the only one that's giving. I don't want to be the only one that's supporting. But I believe that many of you love the organization. Many of you love what we're doing. So I hope that many of you are willing to join us as recurring donors to see this. Over the course of the year, we have some more exciting opportunities coming. I probably should wait to say this, but we're gonna have an ice cream social in late August. I think this was James' suggestion. I don't know, somebody said something about Ben and Jerry's. I don't know how that's gonna work, but we're gonna have a virtual gathering where we're gonna have an ice cream social in late August so we can all get together. We're gonna have a virtual conference together in October. I think the 21st, if I remember correctly, where we're going to get together all day on a Saturday, and we're going to really advance the mission and vision of our organization together. We're going to do a fireside chat in December, and James Quilligan is not going to have to put together the content for it. And so we're going to have an exciting conversation together to go through it. And then at the top of the year, when the caucuses are starting around the country in February, we're going to launch our next education seminar. And then after that, we're going to move towards looking forward having some form of a West Coast conference in Q2, maybe Q3 of next year. So EDA is on the move. We're doing fantastic things. I am grateful for your partnership, and I ask that you continue to endeavor with us. We are looking to have organizations that are partnering with us for the future. But I believe charity starts at home. So I hope that all of you will join me as partners, that you will follow us on Facebook, on YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I can't wait to be back here, same place, same time next week, to come together and be part of session 7. So we're almost done. We got 2 more weeks, session 7 next week, and session 8 wraps us all together up on July 5th. So I look forward to seeing all of you again, to hear your fantastic content and conversations. And back to Terry to wrap us up and send us home. Everybody have a fantastic Wednesday. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you to Carl. If anybody has any concluding remarks, please voice them now, or we will thank you for your participation. And please do go to sustaineda.org, our YouTube channel, and our LinkedIn and Facebook pages to follow us there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you,
Great job.
everyone.
Great job.
Good night.
See you
Thank
next
you all.
week.
Thank you.
Thank you.